News broke this morning, 5 a.m. Eastern. Francis Le Predator Ngannou has signed with the Professional Fighters League. That's right. He has signed with the PFL. He won't be making his MMA debut in the promotion until 2024. Let's dive right into this. Francis Ngannou has labeled this a strategic partnership. He's given equity in the company, leadership roles as well, which is something he wanted, and he highlighted that as early as when he left the UFC and did that exclusive interview on the MMA Hour. The PFL is also going to allow him outside of their promotion to compete in boxing. Francis Ngannou hopes to actually fight a boxing match before he makes his MMA debut in the company, and he will be fighting in the pay-per-view portion of the PFL Fighters League. He will not be fighting in the season. You know, Kayla Harrison now has opted not to fight in the season anymore, and she's also fighting on the pay-per-view side of things as well. That's what Jake Paul is going to be fighting in that division of things. So Francis Ngannou will earn pay-per-view points. Again, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the deal. So some of the finances that were disclosed with the deal, not necessarily his pay up front. It is said that it is a 2 to 3 fight deal, and his opponents guarantee $2 million to fight him. So that is huge. Benjamin was alluding to that in the live chat. That is huge. That just goes to show that it's a 7-figure deal, maybe even per fight. I mean, what do we think? $7 to $10 million per fight sort of thing. I know that's what One Championship was kind of offering him. They wanted him for a 3 to 4 fight deal, and I think the deal was around the $30 million mark from publications that I was reading. Funny enough, and check out the exclusive interview Francis Ngannou did just today with Ariel Helwani, as he doesn't necessarily throw jabs at Chatri, maybe some shadow boxing, maybe some short elbows, as he highlights their interaction. I won't get into it because, that's just me regurgitating, content on another show. Go check it out for yourself. It was quite good. Francis Ngannou will also become the chairman of the PFL Africa, an expansion initiative to produce events on the continent, and will serve as the company's advisory board to represent fighter interests. So the advisory board to represent fighter interest, that extends past being the chairman of PFL Africa. Kind of like what Dan Hardy is doing with the Europe side of things of the PFL and the UK. That's what Francis Ngannou will probably be focusing on with their expansion into Africa, and probably with speaking on behalf of the fighters in some other high-level negotiations down the road as the PFL expands, as the PFL evolves. And they're evolving quickly, as they just signed the linear heavyweight world MMA champion. So that's pretty much everything in the deal. It's a big deal. And funny enough, One Championship came out saying, Francis Ngannou wanted a seat on the board. Francis Ngannou wanted this. Francis Ngannou wanted that. What I'm kind of starting to pick up from all of this personally, Francis Ngannou's management, or his representation, or his people, as he said, they filled one in with what the PFL had offered. Hell, Francis Ngannou's mom wearing that PFL t-shirt. I mean, this was written. This was going down. We all knew this was going to happen months ago, right? One Championship knew what was offered. One Championship was not going to match that offer. And so One Championship came out and, painted the picture that Francis Ngannou asked them for all that, when realistically, at the end of the day, they just couldn't match all of that. That's kind of what I think happened there. On the boxing side of things, folks, I was correct. That's right. I was correct. They're claiming that Ngannou will be paid per fight more than the PFL pays all of its playoff champions in all of their playoff fights combined. That's freaking absurd. No, it is absurd. It's crazy. And it's like, where's the money coming from? I don't know. There was a good point on the MMA Hour saying that maybe and I think maybe Connor Burks brought this up, was saying that maybe the $2 million guarantee for the opponent is hinting at the fact that PFL is going to work on bringing in a big possible free agent for him to fight down the road. Maybe another UFC defect, or maybe a different promotional defect as well. Hell, maybe there's so much heat now between him and Chatri that One Championship sends Melkonen and they just, as soon as he unifies the belt, because he will, and they duke it out. I know One Championship says, and they claim they're only going to do cross promotion with the UFC, which will never happen. But anyways, there's a lot of fun storylines that can come out of this. Again, to sum things up and to give my final opinion, what I was surprised on, what I was correct on, Francis Ngannou will be in the super fight division of the Professional Fighters League. That is PFL. He will be on the pay-per-view side of things. He will get pay-per-view points. He's going to get a huge contract. His opponents are going to get a guaranteed of $2 million to fight him. Need I remind everyone, Francis Ngannou just got north of 500,000 to defend his belt in his last UFC fight. Anyways, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the live chat if you know who is funding this damn thing. Is Wiz Khalifa really making that much money off the weed, ladies and gentlemen? He might be. Francis Ngannou, again, pay-per-view points, $2 million guarantee for his opponents to fight him. So he's making light years more than he was going to be making in the UFC. Hell, maybe even the offer that One Championship originally gave to him. He's going to have equity in the company. That's right, in PFL. He will be an advisor. He will be speaking on behalf of the fighters, and he will also be in charge. He'll also be leading the expansion into Africa, much like what Dan Hardy is doing in the UK and in Europe. So PFL Africa, Francis Ngannou is going to be manning that, in charge of that. He has a 2 to 3 fight contract. His opponent's making $2 million guaranteed to fight him. He has equity in the company. Funny enough, he got pretty much everything that he said he wanted, as absurd as we all thought it was when he was on the MMA Hour right after he left the UFC. The one thing that I was not surprised about was the boxing side of things. That's the one thing I just left out there. I knew, I called it. I said, folks, he was not going to sign with anyone unless he signed with them and was guaranteed the contract, pen to paper, I'm with you, and you will let me go fight boxing. So win or lose in boxing, I can come back. I've still signed, and I can get back into MMA, still make my big bucks. Legacy might be ruined, but stock isn't ruined at all. I knew he was going to have to, and that he wanted to have a contract signed and all of this ready before his boxing fight was announced, held before he boxed. And I knew he was going to box before he fought in mixed martial arts. That I called. Did I think the boxing was going to be announced first? Yes, I was wrong on that. But hell, even Ngannou thought the boxing was going to be announced first versus this deal. What I didn't call, what I had no prediction of at all, was the equity and the expansion into Africa. I knew he was going to be in some sort of some role where he was going to speak on behalf of the fighters, work with them, argue for them, power within the company. I knew that was going to happen. And, the PFL, they have nothing to lose. He's getting a little bit older. He fights out his contract, and maybe he works with the PFL on the Africa side of things, or internally as well. Maybe the PFL has plans for that. Maybe that's something they want to do. Clearly, it's something they want to do anyway. So I wasn't surprised on the internal role. I was surprised on the equity, and I was surprised on the expansion into Africa. I was not surprised that they were going to give him clearance to go box, wherever, whenever. And I wasn't surprised that boxing was going to be first. I wasn't surprised that he's not going to fight mixed martial arts in the PFL until 2024. Oh, but icing on the cake, still on ESPN. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, folks. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat here before we wrap this up. 17-3 is Francis Ngannou's pro MMA record. The world heavyweight champion used to train out of the MMA factory in Paris, France. Now Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. 11 wins via KO, TKO, 5 wins via submission, 1 win via decision. He's 12-2 in the UFC, 3-1 in 100% fights. We talked about 100% fights on the last live stream. A lot of fighters now making their debut in Paris or competing in Paris. We're fighting in a 100% fight in France. Currently on a 2-4-6 fight win streak. Cyril Gane defended his heavyweight title beat Stipe Miocic for the title, beat Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez, Curtis Blades, and his 2 recent losses of note were against Derek Lewis and Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic outclassed him. Derek Lewis walked him. Anyways. Imagine Ngannou gets eliminated in the first round of the PFL. Do you like this deal? Do you think this was the best deal for Ngannou? Do you think PFL is the best place for him outside of the UFC? Let me know your raw, unfiltered thoughts about this in the comments and in the live chat.